Hi, in this teaching I'd like to talk about grading, a bit of the philosophy behind it, and then to move on and talk about rubrics, what they are and how they help us in the grading process. The online SBS is a University of the Nations online extension studies course. This is the area that we gain our accreditation, and therefore, the work the students do does need to be evaluated and does need to be given a grade. And the idea of a grade is to see whether the student has successfully reached a particular standard in their work. And it's vital that that grade is recorded. Good record systems are crucial. And even if a student doesn't want a grade or says they're not doing the work for a grade, nonetheless, we grade their work and we keep that on record. Over the years, I've had students do the SBS, the 9-month school, tell me they're not interested in a grade, they don't want a grade, and then 5 years later, I get a letter, and all of a sudden, because they're pursuing further studies, that grade becomes important. And so I've learned we need to treat each student the same in this regard. Now, why do we grade? Well, the first we could call educational. It's a chance for us to evaluate the student's understanding. And that's really the big point I want to make about grading. Grading isn't about whether a student has failed or passed. It's about, is the student, is their understanding in keeping with the particular level we desire in this course. Helpfully, we could break down the students' learning into them acquiring the skills that they need to acquire, have an understanding of the knowledge that they need to learn, and indeed we also want them to grow in character or in attitude. And as you look at the students' work, you're able to evaluate, are they growing and understanding what they need to in relationship to this course, and then give them feedback to help them further grow in their skills, knowledge, and if necessary, attitude. And it enables the student to know how they're doing and what's expected of them. What is it that this course is able to offer, and how are they able to grow? The other reason for grading in the online SBS is pastoral. The connection with the student who is learning at a distance is really important. They need to know that there's a staff person there that's connected to them. We also require that they're involved in a forum or some kind of online hangout with other students. But for this kind of work, feedback during the grading process is important, where you can give them lots of encouragement. Now, we want the encouragement to be genuine. We don't want to be involved in flattery. But nonetheless, we all need encouragement, and especially in this kind of learning. But also, and especially, it's a time for teaching and coaching them. Here's a chance for that time on Skype or the phone or whatever way you communicate with your students. There's a time for teaching them and coaching them, answering questions and concerns they have, and above all, overseeing their work. How are they doing overall? And please don't forget to pray for them and with them if the opportunity arises, especially if they share their heart in the application and make themselves vulnerable in that way. Certainly, applications can be holy ground, and we want to honour that and keep these things private and encourage and exhort them in these different areas. Do please submit your grades to your centre leaders. They will then put them into a central database, and those grades will then be kept safe. Now, what grading is not? Their students can come from all sorts of educational backgrounds, and for many they will come to this course with a negative experience of education, and especially grading, because in the big wide world out there, for so many, grading is a value statement of the actual student. Are they valuable or not? Have they passed, or are they a failure? If they're a failure, then they will see that as a statement that they're unintelligent. But of course, that is not what grading is about. What grading is simply a measurement for both the staff and the student to know how far the student is understanding and applying the material in this particular course. You can have a student who may be a PhD in some area, but in the SBS Bible study approach and the method we have, they may struggle. It's not because they're unintelligent, it's because what they're doing here may be a new skill, something that they're learning. And so grading is an assessment of the student's learning against a rubric, and a rubric is simply a term given to a particular standard, and we want to talk more about that, but there's an evaluation as to how the student is doing in this particular area against that standard, and then if they have reached the particular standard, then they can be awarded the completion certificate. They have passed the course, they have met that standard, and this certificate and the credits received can maybe later submitted towards a degree. If the student fails or is below the standard, then that indicates that the student has not yet mastered these skills sufficiently. Again, it doesn't mean they're a personal failure. Now, I say this, and I'm sure you know this, but you may understand that students may really struggle if they're not doing very well. And be alert to the educational struggles that people may come to this course with, because it may be you get a chance to pray and minister to them and help them understand that if you give them a low grade, the grade is an indication of their learning in this area, and what we want to do is raise them up so they're able to reach a higher standard through the learning process. If they're below the standard, it doesn't mean they're unintelligent. It simply means they need to give attention to the things they're learning in this particular course and to master them to a certain level, a certain understanding and ability. So, as I've mentioned, the challenge with grading is that many do come from poor, difficult or harmful educational models and see their identity or value in the grade. Whether they get an A or a C can matter to them, and we want to help them get correct thinking. Grading for the SBS is evaluating their work in this course. It's not a statement about them personally. As a staff, you can have challenges with grading, and so I've mentioned already that you maybe need to speak into misunderstandings if needed. The grading you do should be according to the rubric or the standard, and not from emotional feelings towards the student. At times in the past, I've heard such things as a student saying, or staff saying, they gave them a higher grade because they wanted to encourage the student. Well, this is actually being dishonest. If the work of the student isn't to a certain standard, yet you give them a grade, then that is unjust and it's dishonest, and it's also a bit demeaning for the student. What we want to do is raise them up so they can genuinely reach the standard. I heard recently of a young man from West Africa. He didn't have the educational opportunities that others have had, and when he did the Bible core course, he scraped through with a 60. He got a D, and of course, getting a D and getting a 60 just over the pass mark for the course means that he really didn't grasp the material well at all. So what he did was he took the course again. He took the online Bible core course, and the leader of that course worked with him, and when he finished that course, he graduated with a B. And what had happened was the learning in the first course had helped him, but he hadn't reached the standard. And so that didn't mean he was a failure. Rather, he needed more learning, more opportunity to grow. And he took that opportunity in the online core course, and he increased his understanding, and therefore when he finished that course, he had been raised up to the required standard, and the B he received was a genuine B. He really earned it, and he could leave that course with a satisfaction that he had been able to embrace the knowledge and the skills that were necessary. So do not give a grade above what is necessary, because remember the area of justice in grading too. A little history of SBS grading. In my school in '83, we had no grade sheet. I was graded, and at the end of the quarter, I was given an end of term grade. I wasn't quite sure how I received that grade. Certainly, I would have been given feedback on my work, but there was no standard I was aware of, no criteria. And in the next school, when I was on staff, we had one of our students who had a PhD in education, and so she, of course, was asking about the particular criteria for grading, and it was out of that the SBS grade sheet was born. This is a picture of the grade sheet from 1987. This would be one that I used in my early days of leading the SBS at the King's Lodge. And you'll notice how all the different elements of the charting process and the method was broken down and points awarded to each. And the idea was to try and bring some kind of objectivity to the grading process. The problem, of course, is that grading the student's work is not an objective process. For it to be objective, it would have to be like a multi-choice answer test where there's only one right answer. It's either right or wrong. Or maybe grading a math paper whereby you either get the sums right or they're not right. But in the SBS, when you're grading charts, it's a bit like grading an essay. It is far more subjective. And I found the particular grade sheet we used to have very difficult to use. Is a key verse word 2 points or 3 points? Or is the titles of the horizontal chart, are they good? Do they deserve all the points? Or, sometimes, of course, it was obvious, but often it was really hard to tell because it was subjective. Now, introducing rubrics, A rubric is a scoring tool for a subjective assignment. And the idea of it is to help standardize evaluation. And so there's specific criteria that you evaluate the student's work by, and hopefully this will make the grading process easier for you. Now we'll stop this teaching, and there's a very short video from the University of Toronto where the lady there describes what a rubric is. So take a few moments to watch that now.